Hello and welcome. Today I'm going to be talking about swords. What are they, the history of them, and some of the different types. Now, for the first question, what exactly is a sword? A sword is a blade that is longer than a dagger with a handle. They were invented because daggers were too short and inefficient for the combat. A sword's blade varies in length, but is typically about an arm's length, and can have a single-edged blade, which is when one of the edges are sharp, or a double-edged blade when both the edges are sharp, which, as you can see here, we have a double-edged blade. Sword handles are often made to be gripped by either one hand or two, just for, added to some handles is a guard or a cross guard, which is used to stop the hand from slipping up onto the blade. At the bottom of the handle is typically a metal ball, which is used for weight distribution to make sure everything is perfect when you are fighting. Now, let's start from the beginning. When were swords invented? The exact year I couldn't find, but they were invented during the Bronze Age. These swords were made of bronze alloys and typically didn't have a distinct handle. Swords weren't the most popular weapons at first. In some forms of combat, they were unreliable and sometimes even a liability, such as in chariot combat. Once we entered the Iron Age, swords became more reliable, being made out of iron instead of bronze, and the handles also became more defined. Finally, during the Roman Age, the hilt became even more defined from the blade, and the sword was more typically used with a crossguard. Now that we know the when of the swords, what about the how? How are they made? Swords are made from metal being heated up repeatedly and then hit into the shape of whatever sword they are making. Even with it seeming pretty simple, it is a very, very time-consuming process. There are many kinds of swords that have been made, and now I'm going to go over a few of them. This here is a katana. The sword has a curved blade that is single-edged. The handle is made to be gripped with two hands, not just one, and they are typically seen with a saya, which is a sheath for this specific blade. This sword that I have right here is actually a replica of one from the movie Highlander. Here we have a Demolay sword, which to my understanding is basically the exact same as a Masonic sword, other than the symbols on the hilt and blade. It is a double-edged blade with a one-hand hilt, and it is used for different rituals within Demolay, and the symbols on the handle represent the different parts of the Demolay symbol. Next up, we have the Claymore sword. It is a double-edged blade with a two-handed hilt, and the crossguard is more tilted up onto the sword, kind of like a V. And now we have the rapier. It is a very thin bladed sword. It is double-edged with a one-handed hilt. And while most swords were made for thrusting or slashing, this sword was specifically made for lethal stabbings. Now we have the machaira. It is a single-edged curved blade, and the handle is designed for one hand. At the end of the sword, it becomes wider, and then it tapers into a sudden point. And next here is a Celtic sword. This sword is a double-edged and has a one-handed handle. This sword has a crossguard, however, it is unlike the other swords we have seen, as it is a very small guard, practically not even a guard at all. Next we have the gladius. This is a dual-edged with a wooden handle made for one hand, and it is on the smaller end of swords. On the opposite end of the spectrum, we have the long sword. It is a double-edged sword with a two-handed hilt and a very long blade, hence the name longsword. And now we are again going back to the short side with the xiphos. I don't think I'm pronouncing that right. This is a double-edged blade which has a one-handed handle. It is a pretty peculiar blade with it having sort of a groove inwards before going back out again. That was all. I hope you learned something and had fun learning.